Welcome back, guys, to where we left off in Peter Walker's Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. We were at the end of chapter 4. We left off at the title, "The Unexamined Life is Not Worth Living." And that's where we'll start, and we'll go into chapter 5 a bit, which is the section 2 of this book. I just wanted to read some quotes that are significant for me in the last couple of weeks, last week especially, because you can't start this type of work, get all your triggers lifted up and available to observe, and then suddenly stop for a month. I mean, I guess you could. I obviously did, but not recommended. So glad to be here again, and glad that you're here. Now, these 3 quotes are from things I got on Instagram. Let's see, from Awakened Spiritual, we got 2 quotes. Control your emotions doesn't mean avoid your emotions. Feel your shit. Understand your shit. But don't lose your shit. Yeah, I lost my shit this week in a meeting. It was not my best moment by far. Let's see. The second quote, again from Awakened Spiritual, is, "We're not accepting verbal apologies this year, only changed behavior." Yeah. Because when you see changed behavior, all your preconceived ideas about a situation or an individual will just evaporate into giddiness or happiness or relief that the changed behavior brings positive change. And once observed, you can't unobserve it. Same as with negative energy. Except when you see negative energy and then see it transform, you can't help but be uplifted by that. And at least that's where I'm at right now. And then the last quote is from Alana Pratt, again off of Instagram, and it reads, "Hurt will stay as long as you keep giving it your energy. When it appears, feel it, but don't feed it. When you can sit with it without letting it control you, you find a new sense of balance. From there, hurt will lose its power because you are reacting to it less." That was by Young Pablo. And it's a lot in that quote. A lot of people don't do the shadow work because they think that hurt will stay as long as you keep giving it your energy. Well, the difference here is that when you feed it, you stay in those emotions. You don't process them through to a witness standpoint. And when you're at a witness standpoint in a situation, once you've allowed yourself the time and space and focus to really feel your feelings and give them the space they need to detach, then you're going to just be feeding it. Then you're not going to be able to learn anything from it and rise yourself up from that wisdom that you've gained. Now let's see. When you can sit with it without letting it control you, you find a new sense of balance. That's the witness point of view. You see the whole picture. You can see how this action could have been caused by only a very few handful of possible reasons why this behavior is now being shown. So you learn all of that through shadow work of yourself. you start to see the patterns. You start to be able to have compassion and be of forgiveness. And that's really important. That's why we do this. All right, now to the book. The unexamined life is not worth living. It's a quote. A further silver lining in recovery is the attainment of a much richer internal life. I see that partly as having your imagination ignite in a positive way that allows you to be able to quickly change your point of view or your thought process so that you're not rat-tailing, so that you're not overthinking or catastrophizing, that you're able to look at it and go, how can I use my imagination to uplift this situation so that I'm not stressed about it? How can I look at this different? Because there's 1,000 gazillion ways to look at something. Be sure that what you're looking at is from the best positive place in your heart that you can put out into the universe that is your space and time and the people around you. And an important addition to that is to also remember to stop and go, is this mine? Am I giving this judgment or this projection out? Is it a judgment? Is it a projection? Is this person here as a messenger for me to look at what is bothering me about them that's really about me? To be able to discern between a situation like that and a situation where you're like, no, my behavioral patterns through my history have shown that this type of individual or situation is something I need to be cautious of or have my boundaries up heavily over, or, this is how this type of work expresses itself in real life. And sorry about that, but I love that. A further silver lining in recovery is the attainment of a much richer internal life, where you can control your thoughts, your emotions can follow, and you can really create your life in a much more peaceful way. The introspective process, so fundamental to effective recovery work, eventually deepens and enriches survivors' psyches. Ongoing mindful exploration of all aspects of our experience helps us see firsthand what Socrates meant when he said, quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." If you don't examine it, you may never understand why you went through that suffering. What you gained out of that suffering will be lost to you. You'll just see it as a loss, and perhaps yourself as a loser. And what positive things can come from that? The survivor who follows the introspective, quote, road less traveled, becomes increasingly free of compulsive and unconscious allegiances to unhelpful familial, religious, and societal values that were distilled at an impressionable age. That's why I mentioned a few minutes ago about, is this even yours? Is this yours? Did these thoughts come from your heart, your own unique, positive, highest level point of view? Or are you just picking up what people are dishing out and throwing it back at them, thinking it's you? Let's see. The recovery now gets to choose her own values and reject those that are not in her own best interest. She develops a deeper, more grounded self-respect that is not contingent upon going with the herd and shifting center with every new popular trend. In psychological parlance, she becomes free and brave enough to individuate and develop more of her full potential, that being the highest self. In Joseph Campbell's words, The survivor learns to follow his own bliss. Now, for example, I am learning how to butcher, and if you guys see those videos, I'm a trainee as a butcher. I'm but a meat cutter right now, which is still really awesome. There's going to be I don't know how many more months before I can say I'm even remotely a butcher, but I'm definitely a meat cutter. Now, if you see those videos on the channel, that's what that's about. But my point is, being in this job, it doesn't even really, I'm into it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I dig it. Like, I'm excited about it. I see it as a forever job. Skill, really. It's an incredible skill set, a craft skill to know. So that's when they say here, follow your bliss. Now, how many people, and you may be one of them, and I'm sorry if the videos offend in any way, shape, or form, just don't click on them. A lot of people, they may be vegetarian or not about killing any sort of animal for food, may find what I do for what I'm training to do for a career to be just disturbing and totally wrong. Well, that's fine. That's not their bliss, in other words, but it's still mine. So that's a current example of what I think this means. Follow your own bliss, regardless of what a large portion of the population might think of it, or of your family, or whoever. Let's see. He is freer to pursue activities and interests that are naturally appealed to him. See, if I was raised by a family that was completely against eating meat, then I would probably not have gone anywhere near this job, and I would have gotten lost on my bliss because I didn't know who I was and what I was into and what something like butchering means to me, which is like an incredible life skill and very valuable and very important in certain times through history. But anyway, so if you don't know why you're doing something or why you choose not to do something, if it's not your choice, this beliefs that you have, then you might miss out on what your bliss might be, and you might be stuck in frustration and turmoil, specifically frustration. If you find yourself doing something that you thought you had to do, but you never took the time to figure out if you really were meant to do it. So yeah, where were we? Okay, he is freer to pursue activities and interests that naturally appeal to him. He evolves into his own sense of style. He may even feel emboldened to coif and dress himself without adherence to the standards of fashion. Sounds like an Aquarian. He may extend this freedom into his home decor. In this vein, I have seen many survivors discover their own aesthetic, as well as an increased appreciation of beauty in general. I do love a good design. How this contrasts with many of the homes of my normal sports buddies, whose homes are often sparsely decorated, as if they are too afraid to put something out or up lest it not be cool enough. As the survivor recovers the right of free choice, she becomes more open to trying new things, healthy things that mainstream society might consider uncool or even taboo. Here are some examples of this that I believe are conducive to both recovery and healthy everyday living. Voluntary simplicity, improved diet, meditation, alternative medicine, broad-scale compassion, environmentalism, deeper emotional communication, there's a big one, and a broader use of the grieving process. Well, there's a powerful one. The survivor who pursues long-term development on his journey of recovering generally achieves greater overall evolution than the average citizen. For many untraumatized people, the pursuit of ongoing learning often stops after their last formal learning experience, whether that is in high school or college. Introspective development also rewards the recovery with more perspective and wisdom in making important life choices. It also helps the people that I've met, especially in the last half a decade, people that have lived out in the street or in tents or in their car. They've had it rougher, that don't always have running water, that always know where, like, for example, the food giveaways are, because that's where they get most of their food. People that are very in the outskirts, as it were. I've learned a lot of them are crazy. That's a broad statement, I know, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Others are humble and yet confident and so full of life. Very few things scare them. And that's the school of life, the school of hard knocks that you hear so much about, I think. That's an education that will never go out of style. It's been there since the beginning. The traveler. Let's see. Introspective development. I love that. Introspective development. That should be a class in every school, in every grade, every year. Introspective development also rewards the recovery with more perspective and wisdom in making important life choices. It also improves his everyday instinctual choices. Instinctual mean follow your intuition because you're attuned with your environment and yourself and your history. Such as whether to fight, flee, freeze, or fawn in times of real danger. Finally, another silver lining often achieved in later stage recovery is a greater ability to handle normal pain in most healthy and least re-traumatizing way. That's huge. That's huge. By normal pain, I mean the reoccurring existential pain all human beings experience from time to time via encounters with loss, illness, money troubles, time pressures, etc. Such painful encounters can produce emotional reactions like anger, sadness, fear, and depression. It was a hard last week. I did work through it with the help of some friends pretty quickly. And I did try to set up boundaries and to be heard. But overall, I did show anger and sadness and fear, and I was starting to get depressed. So, the average person has not learned how to verbally ventilate and metabolize their feelings without such events. The average person has not learned how to verbally ventilate, that is to allow fresh air to enter, and metabolize, which is to change food into energy. The average person has not learned how to verbally ventilate or keep things grounded and in a rational keel, and metabolize or take and transmute the energy available in the situation into something positive. They slide down into the negative, which is what I did. Wow. Metabolize their feelings about such events. This results in them getting stuck in painful emotional places, especially depression, for inordinate amounts of time. Well, thank God that didn't happen. Okay, we're moving on to the emotional imperialism of don't worry, be happy. One reason that recovering survivors attain greater emotional intelligence is that they eventually see through the mainstream media's indoctrination that people should be happy all the time. Much of the general populace, however, becomes increasingly disassociated from their full emotional experience by anxiously pushing to pump up their mood. I definitely, within the lesson I learned this past week, that's important to speak of too, was what anger triggers in me, because it's not a good place for me, because it reminds me of the angry people in my past, specifically my brother, and it makes me, this is gonna sound stupid, but this is a fact, it's almost like I move my body like he used to, like when he was angry, like a cholo, like, like it's uncomfortable and it's not me, but I go there and I get this fake confidence in that anger. And what does that fake confidence do to me? It makes me stand up straighter, and it makes me want to smile, which is gross to me. It's an icky place where other emotions don't matter. It's almost like in that anger place, I guess it's called, what's the worst name to call it? Self-righteousness? Yeah. It's not a good place for me. But that said, thanks to talking to a good friend, thank you, Whitney, she said, you have a right to be angry. Feel your anger without associating it with anything back there. In the here and now, you have a perfectly good reason to be angry. Allow it. Make it your own. Accept it as your own. I immediately started crying when she got that thought across, that I can be angry. Jeanette can be angry. Things can happen that can anger me, and I don't have to go into shame over it. So I definitely did learn that. That was my lesson that I learned, amongst the positive lesson that I took out, and it also showed me a lot of things I need to look at. Like, why did I have to wait till that I was at that point to get angry? What could I have done to prevent the anger? And why didn't I do something previously to prevent that anger? What stopped me? What was I trying to prove? What was happening there? All sorts of sides to it. What wasn't I listening to that people were saying that would have, had I listened, have perhaps bypassed this? And then on the other side of it is like, let's say I did do the right thing and I had a right to be angry. Is that okay too? Time will tell. Because I go into shame and critic mode. Like, I can't believe I lost my shit. Well, season for everything, right? Time for everything. So look at situations like where, say, you lose your shit, and process the shame and embarrassment and all that, and then excavate it like I'm doing here to see what the positive outcomes may be. Like, perhaps me speaking up was the right thing to do, even though it was maybe unpopular or unadvised. It's that there's the other polarity of the situation. So there's always something multiple layers that you can find, that will make a situation and take a situation out of a shameful or regretful place and into a more productive place. Let's see. Now back to, should you be happy all the time? Much of the general populace, however, becomes increasingly disassociated from their full emotional experience by anxiously pushing to pump up their mood. Many normal, whatever that means, people strive to fulfill the pursuit of happiness as if it were a patriotic duty. Or the love and light strictly people who refuse to see the negative. Which has always been interesting to me. It's there. You can't. It's the whole spectrum's there. Anyway, normal people who strive to fulfill the pursuit of happiness as if it were a patriotic duty. More and more, they employ can't say this word. Employ socially accepted addictions to accomplish this. There, I said it. Smacking. Excuse me, not smacking. It looks like smacking, but it's an N. It's snacking, spending, self-medicating, and online puttering are widespread addictions that seem to be ever on the rise. Yeah. A particularly rampant example of unhealthy mood-altering behavior is porn addiction. Addiction to pornography creates a terrible narrowing of consciousness in the many men who are afflicted with it. It commonly destroys their capacity for real intimacy. Tragically, the use of porn is more and more normalized, even in many psychological circles. I guess it would have to do a lot with what type of porn it was? What you classify as porn. Oh God, there's a whole rabbit hole we're not going to go into right now. I think I've seen like 5 porns in my almost 2 years, so I'm not one to be able to speak on it anyway, so I'll skip that. Here are 2 enlightening references on this latter subject. Oh, well, there you go. They give 2 different, he gives 2 different websites to go and investigate what normalizing porn has done to our society or the peeps. So I'm going to go ahead and try to remember to link those on the description, or you can just, Google side effects of porn addiction, something like that. Let's see. Whoa, no. Okay. As we become more emotionally intelligent, we free ourselves from the hysteria-inducing pressure to continuously pump up the joy in our lives. Beautifully stated. Please do not read this as an ode against joy. It is a blessing to have our natural fair share of laughter and feeling good, but I believe it also a blessing to resist the growing emotional imperialism that demands we become fountains of joy. We are assaulted daily with messages from advertisements, from laugh track saturated TV shows, and from new age enlightenment gurus who shame us into believing that we are less than if we are not consistently bubbling over with ecstatic Disneyland-like enthusiasm. And as someone who actually carries that giggle energy in them, believe me, I love when I'm happy and energized and enthusiastic, and I definitely have those other times where I'm like, fuck it, I don't give a fuck, and I wall myself up. 'Cause I'm human. The pressure to be always up was an enormous shame trigger for me for decades. Sadly, I increasingly see clients and friends struggling with self-contempt for not being happy enough. Shit. It took a long time to get to happy in my life. Anyway, once again, I am certainly not knocking joy, but when it is inauthentic, it is disconcertingly sad and sometimes alienating. In worst case scenarios, a controlling narcissist can emotionally blackmail us to join him in falsely emoting joy. Social media has helped with that. I hear that just as painful is when we codependent force ourselves to laugh to cover up our fear or shame. How are you doing? I'm great. How are you? Right? Well, that's just more actually working at a store, but you know what I'm saying? Like when you're with your partner or when you're with your friends, and whenever you have tried to talk to them, you weren't heard or understood, and worse than it has been turned against you, your vulnerabilities, and your mates feel stupid or wrong. Your heart knows that you're not wrong and that your point of view is as valid as anyone else's. So remember that and try to stay away from people that make you feel less than. Whether they're narcissists or not, doesn't matter. The behavior's there. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, whether they're aware of it or not. And if they're not, maybe it's not just because they're a narcissist. Narcissists meaning they lack empathy due to childhood trauma that usually happens by the age of 8, because that's when they have to lose their ability to have empathy, as I understand it. So by the time they're adults, they're play acting, they're mimicking, they don't even know really what's wrong with them. Well, they know something's off, but I'm very blessed that in this lifetime I was not that. So I have compassion for them. And sometimes you are raised by narcissists, and when you're raised by anybody, monkey see, monkey do. So you'll have tendencies, but you can correct them because of the self-work that you do. You'll start recognizing certain characteristics about your behavior that don't hold integrity or compassion. And that's how you'll find those